Bailey's Story, Chapter 12. Later that summer, the packing began again. Mom walked from room to room, but Ethan stayed on his bed reading a book. I followed Mom for a bit as she put things in the car, and then came back to check on Ethan, confused. He put down his book and we both went outside. Grandma and Grandpa had come out to the car, too. Ethan and I stood next to it as they both got inside. "I'll navigate," Grandpa said. "You'll fall asleep before we cross the county line," Grandma replied. Mom wrapped the boy up in her arms. "Now, Ethan, you're a big boy. You be good. You call if you have any problems." Ethan squirmed under his mother's hug. "I know," he said. "We'll be back in 2 days. You need anything? You can ask Mr. Huntley next door. I made you a casserole." "I know," Ethan said. "Bailey, you take good care of Ethan, here?" I wagged my tail. "Were we going for a car ride or what?" "I stayed by myself all the time when I was his age," Grandpa said. "This will be good for him." I could feel worry and hesitation in Mom, but she let go of Ethan and got behind the wheel. "I love you, Ethan," she said. Ethan mumbled something, kicking up the dirt. The car rolled off down the driveway, and Ethan and I solemnly watched it until it was out of sight. Then, "Come on, Bailey," Ethan shouted. Everything was suddenly more fun. The boy ate some lunch, and when he was done, we played clean the plate. We went into the barn, and he climbed up on the rafters while I barked, and when he jumped off into a pile of hay, I tackled him. An inky shadow from the corner told me the cat was watching all this, but when I trotted over to see what she was doing, she slunk away and vanished. When the afternoon grew late, the boy gave Flair a bucket full of food, and we went back into the kitchen. He got some chicken out of the refrigerator, and then, to my surprise, he took the plate into the living room. I followed him and watched with interest as he switched on the television and settled down in a chair, his plate on his lap. This was news. And it got even better when the boy tossed me bits of succulent chicken skin while he ate. After we played clean the plate, twice in one day, I decided to see just how much the rules had changed. I put a paw up on Grandpa's chair. The boy didn't say anything. I jumped up and looked over at the boy again. He glanced at me, smiled, and returned his eyes to the television. After a bit, I heard the telephone ring, and I opened one eye to watch the boy get up to answer it. I heard him say, "Bed," but after he hung up the phone, he didn't go to the sleeping porch. He went back to his chair and the television, so I curled up a little tighter in mine. I was in a solid sleep when a sudden sense of something wrong woke me with a jolt. I picked up my head. The boy was sitting stiffly upright, his head cocked. "Did you hear a noise?" he whispered. This seemed serious. I got off the chair, stretched, shook, and looked at Ethan expectantly. What did he want me to do? When he didn't move, I went over to his chair. He touched my head, and his fear leaped from his skin. "Bailey," he whispered. I wasn't at all sure what was happening, but I knew there was a threat somewhere. I prepared myself to face it, feeling the fur rising on my back and a growl forming in my throat. Slowly, the boy stood up and took hold of my collar. I stayed close by him, on high alert, as we walked upstairs to Mom's room. I could smell Mom strongly here. Her sweat, the flowery soap she liked to use, her gentleness. Once the door was closed behind Ethan, I could feel him relax a little. So did I, too. He let go of my collar and looked around the room. "Okay," he muttered. He got on one side of the dresser and pushed with all his strength. It skidded across the floor. I watched, puzzled, as he pushed the heavy piece of furniture in front of the door. Hadn't he liked where it was? When the door was blocked, Ethan nodded, and I felt his fear die away. Whatever the threat had been, it seemed to have passed. Ethan pulled off his shoes and pants and flopped down on the bed. "Here, Bailey," he called. I jumped up and lay right beside him, and he hugged me tightly, both arms around me, the way he would do now and then in the doghouse. I licked his chin, which still tasted a little of chicken, and his ear. Then I settled down with my head across his chest, trying to be as comforting as I could. We were together, after all. How could anything be wrong? The next morning we slept in, and then had a fabulous breakfast. Ethan's fear from the night before was totally gone. I ate toast crust and licked scrambled eggs and finished Ethan's milk for him. What a great day! Ethan stayed in the kitchen after we played clean the plate, packing up more food and putting it into a bag, along with a bottle that he filled with water. He slid the whole thing into his backpack. Were we going for a walk? A walk with food? I danced around the kitchen with excitement. Sometimes Ethan and I would go for long walks, and he'd bring sandwiches along for us to share. Lately, all of our walks seemed to take us down by the house where that girl Hannah lived. I could smell her scent on the mailbox. The boy would stand and look at her house, and then we'd turn around and walk home. Whistling, the boy went out to take care of Flare, bringing her a bucket of dry seeds. I sniffed at them and licked a few just to try them. They had no taste at all. I was surprised when, after Flare had eaten, Ethan fetched a blanket and a tiny leather saddle and put them on the horse's back. We'd done this a few times before, with Ethan climbing up to sit high on Flare's back while I watched from the ground. But it had always been with Grandpa there, and always with the gate to Flare's big yard firmly closed. Today, the boy opened the gate and then hoisted himself up onto the horse with a grin. "Let's go, Bailey," he called down to me. I followed grumpily. I didn't like it that Flare was suddenly getting all the boys' attention. I was so far away from Ethan, too, forced to walk beside this huge creature that I thought was about as dumb as the ducks. Soon we were in the woods, walking along a trail. I spotted a rabbit and took off after it. I would have caught it, too, if it hadn't cheated by changing directions all of a sudden. I smelled more than one skunk, but of course I didn't go in their direction. Those skunks weren't worth my time. We stopped at a small pond and Ethan got off the horse. Both Flare and I took a drink, and Ethan ate sandwiches, tossing me the crusts. "Isn't this great, Bailey? Are you having a good time?" I watched his hand. Was he asking me if I was ready for more sandwiches? Of course I was. It was nice to be out in the woods, even if Flare did have to tag along. Ethan hadn't brought the flip with him, so that was one good thing. And there were so many interesting smells, plus, of course, my boy. Ethan packed up the leftover sandwiches and got back up on Flare. We kept going. We were so far from home by now that I could not smell any sign of it. I could tell that Ethan was getting tired from his voice and the way he sat on Flare. "Do we go this way or that way?" he asked after we'd been riding for a while. "Do you remember, Bailey? Do you know where we are?" I looked up at him and wagged, and we kept walking. Ethan nudged Flare down a new trail. I'd marked so much new territory that my leg was getting sore from being hoisted up into the air. And then Flare suddenly lifted her tail and let loose a huge gush of urine. What a stupid thing to do! Now her scent would wipe out mine, and nobody could smell me. Since I was the dog, that wasn't right. The horse should have known better. I wandered up ahead to clear the smell from my nose. I topped a small rise, and that's when I saw the snake. It was coiled in a patch of sun, sticking its tongue out and in, out and in. I stopped, fascinated. I've never seen one before. "What is it, Bailey? What do you see?" Whatever the boy was saying, it probably wasn't "go bite the snake." I didn't think it was the kind of thing I wanted to play with. Suppose it turned out to be like the skunk and had no idea how to play properly. I ran back to the boy and Flare, keeping pace with them up the small hill. I wondered how Flare would react when he saw the snake curled up in front of her. At first, she didn't see it, but as she got closer, the snake suddenly pulled back, lifting its slim, dark head, and that's when Flare screamed. I didn't even know that a horse could make that sound. It startled me so much that I jumped into a bush and barked wildly. Flare's front legs came off the ground and she spun, kicking. The boy went flying off her back and hit the flat, packed dirt of the trail with a thump. I ran to him at once. He sat up slowly, took a deep breath, and then jumped to his feet. He was okay. I danced happily around him, but he wasn't interested in playing. "Flare!" he shouted. The horse was already running at a full gallop down the trail the way we had come, her hooves pounding the dirt. The boy took off after her, and then I understood what needed to be done. I glanced back at the snake. It seemed to have disappeared, and then I chased Ethan, who was chasing Flare. Obviously, this was a race, and Ethan and I had to win. We didn't, though. I tore past Ethan, trying to keep up with Flare, but she was too fast, and I was getting too far away from my boy. I turned back to be with him. He'd stopped running and was standing still. "Oh, no," he was saying as I reached him, but I could tell that the no wasn't for me. "What are we going to do, Bailey?" And the boy started crying.